Let's talk about something so deeply a part of our world that we pretty much take it for granted: writing. But this isn't just going to be a quick history lesson on the alphabet. Oh no. We are going to dig into how this one piece of technology didn't just change how we talk to each other, it literally rewired the human brain. So let me just start with this question for you. The way your brain works right now, how you process ideas, how you form an argument, the very structure of your thoughts, do you think that's just the default setting, the natural way a human mind is supposed to operate? Well, what if I told you that what we consider normal thinking is actually the result of a piece of tech, a technology that completely rebuilt human consciousness from the ground up? And that technology is literacy. To really get it, we need to imagine a world before it existed. All right, so to understand just how massive the impact of writing was, we have to try and step back in time. We have to imagine a world that didn't run on text messages and websites, but one that was built entirely on sound and memory. So in a primary oral culture, a culture with no writing at all, knowledge isn't in a book on a shelf. It's inside people. The only way it exists is if someone is speaking it, sharing it, and remembering it right now. Words aren't little black marks on a page. They're events. They're powerful. They happen, and then they're gone. And here's the craziest part. Without any written records, the past isn't some fixed timeline. It's fluid. It's always being subtly tweaked to make sense in the present. And that leads to this incredible idea called structural amnesia. Now, this isn't about people having bad memories. It's a collective, totally unconscious process. I love this description. It's like a kind of social digestion. The community keeps what's useful for today and just quietly forgets everything that's become irrelevant. It's how their traditions always feel perfectly consistent and up to date. And here is a perfect real-world example of how that works. The Gonja people in Ghana had this foundational myth, right? Their great founding king, Jokpa, had 7 sons, and each son founded one of the 7 divisions of their state. Made perfect sense. But then the British came in, and their administration effectively wiped 2 of those divisions off the map. Fast forward 60 years. Anthropologists come back and ask to hear the myth again. And guess what? The story had changed. Now, King Jokpa only had 5 sons. The other 2 weren't erased or censored. They were just forgotten. They were digested by the collective memory because they just didn't matter anymore. So this is the key takeaway. For a purely oral culture, the past isn't about creating an accurate record of what actually happened. Its job is to be a charter for the present. It's a story that explains and justifies why things are the way they are right now. Myth and history, they're the exact same thing. And you can't spot a contradiction because the story is always perfectly in sync with the present. And then everything changed. A new technology showed up that could freeze words, pin them down in time and space. And in its most powerful form, it was so simple almost anyone could use it. This wasn't just an invention, it was the alphabet revolution. To really get why the alphabet was such a bombshell, you just have to look at the numbers. Before the alphabet, writing was ridiculously hard. Logographic scripts like Chinese have tens of thousands of unique characters. Syllabic scripts had hundreds. You had to dedicate your entire life to mastering them, which meant only a tiny elite group of scribes could read or write. But the Greek alphabet, it had about 24 signs. That's it. It went from being nearly impossible to something a child could learn. It was a total game changer. You see, the absolute genius of the alphabet was its simplicity. It didn't try to make a symbol for every single thing or idea in the world. No way. Instead, it made symbols for the tiny handful of basic sounds, the phonemes, that we use to build all of our words. It was basically a simple code for speech itself. And because it was so easy to pick up, it just shattered the monopoly that the scribe class had on information. It was a democratic technology. It put the power of writing into the hands of a whole lot more people. And once this democratic script started to spread, especially in ancient Greece, it didn't just change how business was done or how laws were recorded. It started to rewrite the internal operating system of the human mind itself. All of a sudden, the past wasn't fluid anymore. Once those ancient Greek myths were written down, they were frozen. They became fixed objects you could study. They stopped changing. And for the first time, people could compare different written accounts and go, wait a minute, these 2 stories don't line up. The past became a separate country, a record of what was, not just a convenient story for what is. And this created the space for a totally new kind of thinking, a skeptical inquiry that we now call history. And you can literally hear that new consciousness being born in this quote. This is Hecataeus, one of the very first Greek historians, and he basically says, look, I'm writing down what I think actually happened. Because all those old stories the Greeks tell, I've looked at them, and honestly, they're ridiculous. That attitude, that ability to stand outside your own tradition and critique it, that's almost unthinkable in a purely oral culture. Writing created skepticism. So, what it all boils down to is this. Writing rips language out of its natural habitat. It takes words out of the moving river of speech and turns them into static objects you can pin down and look at. It's like pinning a butterfly to a board. For the first time ever, you could just stare at a word. You could analyze an argument sentence by sentence and see how it was built. Language itself became something you could study. And once you could do that, a whole new world of mental tools suddenly became possible. Abstract thought, for instance. You could start talking about justice as a pure idea, not just pointing to a just person in a story. This led straight to the invention of formal logic by Aristotle, a set of rules for how to think correctly. Knowledge could be sorted into neat categories, like biology or physics, and the very private, solitary act of reading and writing helped create a new kind of inner life, an individual consciousness. This entire revolution shaped the world we live in today. I mean, we are all living in the house that literacy built. But, right from the beginning, some very smart people were worried about the cost of this powerful new technology. And here's the crazy irony. One of the biggest critics of writing was Plato, one of the greatest writers who ever lived. He was genuinely worried that it would destroy our real memory, that we'd start relying on external notes instead of actually knowing things. He feared it would create people who weren't actually wise, but just thought they were because they'd read a lot. I mean, does that sound at all familiar? It's basically the exact same argument people make about the internet today. And Plato really was onto something. Our literate world has its own set of problems. We don't have that social amnesia to help us forget what's no longer relevant. Instead, we have the burden of history, this massive, ever-growing library of the past that can feel crushing. We get information overload. Our deep focus on texts can sometimes pull us away from the living, breathing present. And it creates brand new ways to divide people, not by who their parents were, but by what they've read. So that brings us right back to where we started. Writing was a technology that rewired our brains and created the very idea of the modern mind. Which leaves us with one last, massive question. As we shift from a world of paper pages to a world of glowing pixels, hyperlinks, and algorithmic feeds, is our consciousness being fundamentally rewritten all over again? And what will the consequences of this new literacy be?